Hello and welcome to the Coder Kids podcast, episode number 36. I'm Jeff Ward, founder of Coder Kids, along as always with
James Thornock.
Happy to be here. Today on our show we have Juli Rush, who is a longtime partner. She is a coordinator at St. Mark's Episcopal School. The school is a longtime partner of ours. Juli is someone that we've worked with for a long time. We're happy to have her on the show. James, why don't you tell everybody what we kind of talked about?
Yeah, so we talk about, first of all, they've been a summer camp partner for a while, an after-school partner, so just a tiny bit about that, but we really talked about futurology and a whole bunch of stuff. We talk about education specifically and how it relates to future learning and future possible learning with technology and how that affects kids on the ground level. I think that's the best summary I could give. Do you have any kind of fun updates in your life? Anything going on?
Oh, man. Well, it's springtime, so I have spent a lot of time outside. James, I don't know if I've told you this. I still don't think I've given you a full tour of the house.
No.
I need to do that. We're almost done with our home reno, and I am getting started outside. I've spent a lot of time outside, raking up old leaves and cleaning up stuff. The garden was a bit neglected by our previous owners, so we have grapevines that I've been kind of retraining and pruning. Man, that took a lot of time. Anyway, it's been a lot of fun to be outside, and the weather's getting to be really, really nice here. Although, like today, it's in the 70s, and then I think we're going back to like the 50s. So it's spring in Utah. That's all I can say.
That's
right. How
about
you, James? What's the latest?
Yeah, so it's, I guess, spring in Houston. It's been going back and forth between 50 degrees and 90. It's like weird jumps. But if you're an allergy sufferer, my heart goes out to you. I got to wear, some ridiculous mask outside, not for the coronavirus, just for the pollen. And so that's fun. Got to do a nasal rinse and stuff. You don't need to hear that. I've been working on drywall. That's been learning how to do drywall. I said that last week. I discovered a new game, which is Hades. It's insanely fun. Funnest game I've played in a very long time.
What kind of game is it?
Not recommend it for your kids. It is it's a game, it's a roguelike, so you explore dungeons. Basically, you are the son of Hades, Zagreus. It's all Greek mythology. And your goal is to essentially get out of Hades, or, to get out of hell. And so you get help from Zeus and Athena and all of the, Achilles and all these fun characters. And you try to make it out and get to Earth.
Sounds a little too scary for me, James.
It's not scary, but it's like intense and it's hard. Like it's very, very skill based.
I don't know, man. I get scared in Minecraft dungeons, so I'm a bit of a wimp.
Well, it's not first person. It's like third person. So you're kind of like looking down on the scene. It's like it's like Heroes of the Storm perspective.
Oh, okay. That wouldn't be scary at all then.
But it's insanely hard. It's very, very difficult.
I might check it out. So, well, anyway, back to Juli, our guest of honor today for episode 36. We had a really great chat. Guys, one more shout out. Man, I feel bad because you already heard about it once. You're going to hear about it with Juli twice. But why not just throw in a fourth time, James?
Yeah.
A shout out to St. Mark's Summer Camps. If you're in Houston, it is the place where we have the most kids, the most camps, the most fun.
Yeah.
Fun for everyone. So,
all right. There's all kinds of tech, whether the physical items, the laptops, we've got special gadgets that we can't accommodate at other locations. So it really is the place that has the most variety of classes, and the collaborative nature of being in person is, it's hard to replace. So without further ado, we'll transition. Welcome to the interview portion of the Coder Kids podcast. Today, we welcome Juli Rush, who is the director of Extended Day at St. Mark's Episcopal School. So welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, guys. Glad to be here.
We have a long-standing special relationship with Julie because we run summer camps at St. Mark's Episcopal School in Houston and have had summer camps there for 4 or 5 years at least.
Yeah, every summer but last since we've been, since we started, really. So
don't remind me about last summer, James.
Deep apologies to any parents that were signed up last year. We remember it, and it's not a fun memory. But that's just because all the previous memories were so fond, right?
Yes.
So I guess we should get that out of the way. We are going to be doing a whole host of summer camps at St. Mark's, a variety that knows no bounds. So check it out at either our website or St. Mark's Episcopal School's website. There's a lot that we have, and it can be very clean, very safe, and very fun. That's it.
Yeah, we are excited to have you guys. And we have been on campus since the beginning of August for school, and it has gone well. And we, in March, we're just wrapping up March, and now we're in April, and, had no cases on campus at all. So that was really great. A lot of our families and community are doctors themselves. They work in the med center there in Houston, which is just a 10-minute drive down the road, and have all taken it seriously. And we're looking forward to having you guys for the summer, for having our summer camp back. So glad and excited. I know a lot of families have been calling and are really interested in y'all's camp. So glad to have you again.
Julie, I wanted to get your feeling on, and we'll talk more. We haven't mentioned yet that Julie is studying futurology at the University of Houston. So, without going too deep, I just want to get your feelings on what you feel like the perception is for summer 2021 and how your interactions are going with parents. Is there a lot of apprehension, or do you feel like parents are starting to come around to the idea?
Yeah, I think a lot of the families are excited. They feel like things have gone safely. Beginning of last summer, May, it was like the spring break that never ended.
Yeah. Oh, man.
We all went on spring break and then we didn't come back. And so I think this summer, we've made it a full year. We made it past spring break, and a lot of the families were hesitating. They wanted to see what happens after spring break. Will it be the same as after Christmas break when we, had quite a bit of an influx of cases after Christmas. So I think a lot of families were waiting and were excited to see what was going to happen. And the city, continues to improve, and the state of Texas, we're now vaccinating everybody. And so that has helped quite a bit. I think from, like the futurology standpoint or foresight, I think that the people that I'm involved with, U of H is where I go to school. That's where I'm getting it's a master's of science in foresight is the technical term, but they'll call themselves futurists or futurologists. They have all different types of names. And the field is considered post-disciplinary. So it's not even multidisciplinary. It's like beyond discipline. So
This is
really like this is awesome.
It's the future.
Yeah.
It's like where magic and science meet. We're beyond. We're the beyond. This is great.
Yeah. Yes.
Sorry, Julie.
Sorry. We apologize.
You're good. So a lot of the people that I work with, I'm in a class with a woman who is the CEO of a nonprofit in Florida, a large one, and then a woman who works for NASA. Right now, the graduating class is doing a project with the CDC that has been going on for several years. And I think when it comes to things like creating a vaccine, the people there are like, do you guys think we just started making a vaccine for a possible pandemic? Or do you think maybe we've been planning on something like this? So I think the people that I share classes with and that I work with and are doing projects with companies, organizations like the CDC, they are so far ahead. And just because something isn't in mainstream media doesn't mean things aren't being done. So I think it's comforting to me in the world that I'm existing in to hear people say like, oh yeah, we've got this under control. This is not something brand new for us. So that helps me kind of comfort parents and say, I think that we're really starting to get a handle on all of this, and your kids are safe with us, and our staff have been doing this for a long time, and I think that helps everybody feel a level of safety.
Yeah, that's good. So, I mean, so what you're saying is like, yeah, parents were hesitant.
Yeah.
But then y'all proved that things were going to be okay, at least at St. Mark's. So
yeah, we've been calling local schools as well, just to say, what are your protocols? What's going on in the area? Do you have the same standards as we do? If there are schools that are having giant, rallies in their gym and they aren't enforcing mask wearing and things, that changes the game of who gets to come to summer camp, and we ask people to really think through that. And families who are traveling, we've had lots of conversations. We want people to be able to travel, and we want them to do it safely. That's what summer is for. And so just lots of conversations, which is good. I think this continues to bridge our community. And since we are a school that asks the public to come in and be a part of our summer camp experience, I think that I've had a chance to talk to lots of local schools, lots of local families who aren't even St. Mark's families. And that's really refreshing and fun to get to be connected outside of our own school.
Julie, I want to dive in and ask a future question. So thinking about future possible diseases, what I'm sure you guys have talked about it a lot this year due to what has happened.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, like, what is the take? Like if other things come along that are maybe more severe than what we faced this year, what's kind of the take of your cohort in thinking about future diseases?
Yeah, there's part of what foresight is and what futurology is looking at what are we doing to the planet? What are we doing as humans that are driving us into the ground? And you look at things like, moving beyond what they call the cornucopian age, where we felt like we could take everything from the earth and it was just there for the taking. That we're moving into another age of where we need to start taking some responsibility. And so when it comes to things like diseases, like all of it's connected. I'm in a systems class right now, which is, looking at things like chaos theory and complex adaptive systems and things like this that look at systems, not just systems in a computer or systems like that, but human systems in society and culture, and saying, where are the pieces, and there are these things they called wicked problems, which is something so giant that our brains can't seem to understand them. But when you look at the system and you start actually analyzing the pieces, it's really not so overwhelming. It just needs some time and it needs some communication. And when you have something like a wicked problem, the atmosphere and what's happening to the earth, we take less responsibility because everybody, we can't say what's happening across the pond and they can't tell us what to do. And so it's one of those things. It's like, well, it's like a public park. Who takes responsibility of the public park and whose fault is the public park, on a grander scale.
Yeah.
And so, right. And so I think when we
term
look
for
at
that.
what's happening to the planet and how we handle illness and health and things like that is part of a very large system. And I have a professor and he likes to say, if you're surprised, you're not paying attention. And so his big thing is, if you're really shocked, talking of technology and social media and the things, the world that you guys live in as well, is, if you're paying attention to what is being put on your phone, and, we had movies like The Social Dilemma that came out and parents were very concerned. And, we like to say, keep paying attention, like this is our job, is to pay attention and to find resources like you guys who can say, here's what's what. You actually don't have to do all the work to find it out. We'll help you navigate this space. I have a first grader who loves Minecraft and loves building and doing all those types of things. And she's a kiddo who we want her, if this is what you're interested in, we want to support you in ways that maybe we weren't supported as strongly when we were kids. And so we want to support her in that world. And if she wants to do gaming, if she wants to do coding, we want to be a part of that with her, but we want to make sure we're doing our jobs as parents. And so part of it is just paying attention. Read the articles, read the news, make sure you're getting it from a credible news source. make sure that, like for my class, like you're not just relying upon social media to be what tells you what's what. And so I think all of that helps, right?
I was just going to jump in, and sorry, James, because I know you have some. I know you
a lot
have
of head
say,
nodding.
but-
I'm just agreeing. I do have some questions though. Yeah.
One thing that has always stood out to me, and I don't know how much you pay attention to financial markets, but take the crash of 2008, 2009. There was a movie that came out, The Big Short.
Right.
Lots of people saw it and are familiar with it. But this guy, Michael Burry, is like this insane. He's not insane. He's like very rational,
Right.
but he's very like not mainstream.
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting because he saw the crash of 2008 coming. He saw the recession coming. He saw the housing crisis, where a lot of people turned a blind eye and didn't see it or didn't want to see it. And then, he recently has come out with some things saying, this was within the last 3 months or so, like, look, I've warned you guys. I've told you. Everybody got mad at me for not warning you the first time.
Yep.
So I'm warning you this time that some bad things are coming, and people again kind of shove them off like, no, it's
Doomsday prophet type.
Yeah, doomsday prophecies. But anyway, I just think it's interesting how everyone has access to the same news ultimately, but the way that we see the news and interpret the news and can look forward to future events, because I'll say that I'm guilty of not doing what you've described. Like I read the news a lot, but it's like, that's interesting. I'm glad that I understand that, but I'm not thinking to the next level of what the future holds.
Yeah, a lot of what the class is saying, anybody can do these things, and there are lots of books on, especially like strategic foresight for business. And I am less attracted to the foresight for business. I don't know that I'm as interested in helping people get more money or helping businesses win. Like there's lots of who wins and who loses, who are the stakeholders involved and at what cost. And so there's big, you look at a whole system, and so I'm much less interested in that and really helping students. We're working on creating a design lab. Stanford has kind of one of the best ever D labs for K through 12 schools. And we've been talking about, starting a design lab for us as well, which is not just design. There's futures design and there's design thinking, and but there's also, foresight in the area that I'm in right now. And so much more kind of helping students think through these types of things. And, there are things called, we have horizons, there's first, second, third horizon. And then there's weak signals of, there are things, if it's hit the news, if it's in the New York Times, it is no longer a weak signal. This is information anyone can have. But there are things that are happening on, forums like Reddit or places like that, where information that, like once upon a time, for an example, would you have ever thought when people had their giant TVs in their living rooms to watch the football game, that one day people would prefer to like lay in their bed and watch a movie on their phone? Like, did you ever think that we were
Oh my gosh.
to that? Right? Like everybody wanted a giant TV.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm
so
still
now,
a big TV guy personally, but
Well, James
but I
also
have to
collects-
make the choice though, right?
He also collects digital movies though, so.
Yeah. Well, so you look at something like that, and somebody saw, somebody overheard a conversation at a conference where they said, soon there's going to be TV in your pocket, and somebody said, there's no way. Somebody said, oh, I heard this thing, and they posted it on, forum, or they posted it somewhere. And so now with the way that technology moves so quickly, you look at what happened with NFTs, and being able to create art that lives
That's super recent.
Right, exactly. And so, you have kids that are strapping on Oculus and creating art, and who knows what will come out of something like that. And so anyway, it's a fascinating world. I feel like I can always barely keep up with what's happening. You go on Twitter and there's Futurology Reddit threads and Twitter threads. And my mind is constantly being blown by what's happening in the world. And it's fascinating and so exciting. I love it.
I feel like it encompasses everything. I'm trying to narrow it down for the people listening, and for myself.
We said, James, that we want to talk about the future of education. So
right.
Let's narrow it let's narrow it to education.
All
So
right.
James, I'm still kicking it to you,
Okay.
but let's narrow to education a little bit. What do you think?
Yeah. So I guess within education, right, Julie,
Right.
you have this future design and just trying to understand the future. Because you should probably first understand it before you try to design it. Otherwise, you get other problems. But are you trying to move into a system which is post-subject or post-disciplinary? Like, are you trying to move away from math and science and move into a math, science, history meld? Like, at the educational level, do you think that's a good idea? And I'm not asking in terms of like, do you think that St. Mark should do it? But do you think like that everybody should do it? Because I literally was having this thought like yesterday morning. I was sitting down with Jacob on the couch, and I'm just being a dad, and I was thinking like, what is this guy's education going to look like? He's 1 year, he's a year old, and I'm thinking like, he has so many opportunities I never had. But I was thinking like, do I teach him in the traditional, like, okay, we're going to do math, we're going to do science, we're going to do this, or do I go topical? Do I teach, the Russian Revolution of, 1921? Like, do I teach him that? And then do I teach him the economics and the history and the religious component and sociological components of that event? Do I teach event wise? Do I talk about like the governmental system of Russia? Like, it's so complicated. So my brain broke yesterday morning when it was a real question, burning question on my mind. Like, how am I going to teach him? I have all these options, and there's probably not like a wrong one, but so all of those thoughts, trying to distill it into a like very concise question. How should we be thinking about learning in general? And then how should we be thinking, or how can we think about education, either in a school setting, or at home, or some kind of an amalgamation of both?
Yeah, I think that's $1 million question, right? Like, I think that's what we all want to know.
That's why I'm asking it. Yeah, tell me, Julie.
Box it and sell it on Amazon. Like, there has to be a way, right? So I think something unique that we're doing at our school for our middle schoolers is working on continuing to develop a humanities program. Okay. So it's, the mixing of history and English and language arts, because if you're reading, like right now my brother-in-law actually teaches at St. Mark's, and he is teaching sixth grade English, and they are reading books. They have a book club, and they're reading books from the same time, the same generational time in history, but from multiple different perspectives. And, one of the books is called The War Saved My Life, and it's about what was happening when a little girl was uprooted from her family and had to go, live with another family. But what was happening in her home wasn't safe. And so when she was uprooted because of the war, it actually worked out better for her. And so when students are reading about these things, they're not just reading about history, and they're not just memorizing dates and facts. They're getting, the social emotional part of why would a child not feel safe in their home? And what would it look like for war to have actually helped her? And so you start having these conversations that go way into versus just the historical facts, and way more than just the prose of the writer. But then you get into social emotional learning and having some kind of hard conversations for a sixth grader. And you have to have teachers who know how to navigate those types of things themselves, right? So one of the pieces that we've been working on is, how do we help adults who maybe didn't grow up with a good wealth of social emotional learning? How can you expect a teacher to teach something they don't know themselves? And so part of it is, at St. Mark's, we have something where we say we focus on the whole child, right? So it's not just like, let's fill your head with facts, but it's also, how do you sit in your chair? How do you be kind to your friend? So it goes deeper even than just the curriculum, so part of what you're speaking to, I think, James, is some of the academics, but then you go below that and say, what's underneath all of this? If we're spitting out kiddos who are super geniuses, that's wonderful. But if they don't know how to be kind, then what's the point, right? And so we're working on that part. But then also the cross-discipline or post-discipline, I would say we grew up, and maybe our parents, 2 generations, said, you go into one field and you have one career and you stay in that. And it's applauded to be, 40 years in on the same job in the same field. And now we have people who they get multiple degrees from multiple colleges in multiple fields. And, you're well rounding out the adults. So why wouldn't we do that with the kids, And so looking and saying, how are the places where overlap? So you look at STEM, and what started out as just STEM turned into STEAM. And you added the art element to it because there's so much math and science involved in art. And so I think those things keep expanding, like whether it be humanities program or it be a STEAM program. We're continuing to develop a middle school elective program where the kiddos get to pick a kind of a pathway or a track that they're interested in. And even though they may say, I want to go in a STEM track, they end up getting to pick one elective a trimester in something that completely is outside of that track, so that these kids aren't pigeonholing themselves just based on interest. So they may end up taking like a lighting engineering for the school musical. They may take a class and discover something completely new. So I think continuing to well round out those students, and also being a child-centered environment. We hear a lot about teacher-centered, or that used to be kind of a buzzword that has gotten some tainting, I guess. We used to be very teacher-centered of like, what did they need, and what were they taught? And now we're doing child-centered. So what you're saying, James, of like challenging and saying, what are these kids interested in? Okay, so they don't really care about any of this, and we're not going to throw the whole curriculum out, but let's focus on something that actually interests them. And so it keeps more to what the kids need versus the grown-ups in the room, which I think is a hopeful place to be.
Well, this is what I was going to say is that I've noticed that, and James and I have had this conversation on this podcast before and talking to different people, but it is interesting how a lot of times in a lot of careers, the actual path that someone chooses is not like maybe what they majored in, or, so I was just listening to a podcast the other day, product management podcast, which is, don't ask me why I was listening to it. So, maybe not for everyone, but I'm kind of into product these days. And this guy is the director of design, or the director of product at a company called Figma, which Figma is like a design tool for like web. Like if you're building a new website, if you're building a web app, you can like design it all before it's functional. And he was saying that he actually got started in design because he was on his newspaper staff in high school, and then he was on his newspaper staff in college, and then he was like, I'm really good at designing things, so I'm going to become a UI designer.
Right.
And I just think it's so interesting, like the approach that we've taken in traditional education, like you have to learn this, this, and this, whereas a lot of times people, if they're lucky, they get to follow the path that they're actually most passionate about or that they're most interested in. And so I kind of feel like there needs to be a place, and you touched on this for sure, but there needs to be more of a place for people to be able to pursue and explore like interesting passions that don't fit into our normal academic models.
Right.
So that's kind of, I don't know, that's kind of the approach that I'm feeling right now with education, is like, man, we spend so much time, and obviously foundational skills are super important, but by the time you get to 5th or 6th grade, I don't know, I almost feel like for certain kids, maybe a highly academic model is, an apprenticeship model would trump like the academic model that we currently have. So I actually don't have a question to follow up, but I do have something that's on my mind. Something that's on my mind is just thinking about technology and thinking about the tools that technology offers in the space of education. I'd love to get your thoughts on that. And we've explored some of them through COVID, but what are you kind of feeling like the future might hold for how technology is going to change the face of education?
Yeah, I think that COVID for sure, like that showed us all kind of like what we were made of. And we had already given out iPads to our middle schoolers. You know, they were working on every middle schooler got to have an iPad, and they did a lot of the class. We use Apple Classroom, and you know, lots of things were being already done for our middle schoolers. But when this happened, we were able to very quickly transition to being able to have that available for the other students. And, you know, and that doesn't come lightly, that we are an independent school and that we were able to do some things that other schools were not able to do, and did find some ways of donating technology and donating some funds to be able to help some other local schools that were incapable of making that transition. And so I think that felt good to be able to help other people who couldn't do that. But we were lucky that our students got to transition from kindergarten up to having iPads at home and having devices at home that they could use to be able to do Zoom and things like that. In my grad school program right now, one of my professors is he's finishing his PhD at Carnegie Mellon, but he lives in Calgary. And one of my professors is at Oxford and is teaching at Oxford and teaching here. And so my program has already moved, you know, beyond just face-to-face, which is valuable for sure, but has already moved. And this woman who is teaching the class from Oxford is like one of the biggest in the program that I'm in. You know, she's one of the biggest in the world for what she does. And the fact that I get to sit with her once a week and have, you know, a screen, but be face to face with her and get to meet with her is remarkable. You know, I would have never gotten the chance to study underneath her. And I think we will continue to see that with our students, of being able to get them in touch with people. You know, if they're passionate about something, we can usually reach out to anybody who's willing to give a little bit of time to speak to our students. And so what does that look like to have professors across the world to be able to speak to certain topics, to be able to tune into a classroom and participate with them, or being able to connect with students across the world that aren't, you know, we talked about just a minute ago about that book club in 6th grade with students who, you know, are reading stories about kids that were across the world experiencing the same time, but a very different existence. So what does it look like for kids right now? You know, what does it look like for kids to be able to touch in with other countries, to see, you know, some of our students don't even know that kids don't have access. Their parents don't have access to vaccines, that they don't have access like we do. And so not just like to be eye-opening, but like, what can we teach each other? And so I think part of it will continue to be more connected, which I value and I think is a really good thing, that we can keep learning from each other. I think classrooms will continue to utilize technology. We really embrace, you know, our being able to use our classroom technology, being able to use iPads, obviously in the time of COVID. But I think that technology is not our enemy. I think that this is a place where we can continue to do well. I do think there are some ethical things, which we've talked about, even having a technology ethics class, to continue to work with kids of, you know, what does it look like for big data? What does it look like, you know, and helping students, because they're going to be the CEOs one day, right? They're going to be the ones. And so how do we have an ethical conversation that says, what's the best way to hold someone's privacy in your hands? And so I think there are ways to teach middle schoolers that, so that when they grow up, they remember these conversations. And when you talk about like design and things like that, you know, I never thought I would ever get into design. I have a double major undergrad in sociology and theology. And now I'm studying futurology, you know, so,
yeah,
you know, kind of worlds apart and kind of not.
But you're also like an amazing photographer, videographer.
I do. I love photography. Yeah.
It's interesting. I don't know.
Yeah. I used to have a sign in my office that said, "This is where the fun stuff happens." Because in addition to the job I do, I'm our student council sponsor and I'm a liaison to the arts. And so there's other roles that I play at the school. But I think that one of the big things that I get to do is helping students think and ask questions. And I have a sign now that says, "How might we?" which is a design thinking question. How means you're asking a question, right? You're solution oriented. Might means you're hopeful. You know, you're expecting that there could be a solution. And we means you're collaborative. And so I use that all the time. Like, start any problem with how might we? How might we? How might we? You know, and you can solve anything if you're willing to ask that question. And I think our middle schoolers are probably tired of hearing me say that, but I think it's a great way to start any wicked problem, right?
I like that.
That is really tight. So you mentioned before, you know, the cornucopia mindset of, you know, the world is our buffet table, to, you were trying to move away from that. Maybe at least be conscious of the planet and the ecosystem and, biosphere, and maybe even give back. So in terms of, there's some movements going on in the agricultural industry. I'm just using this as an example, Jeff. So, but there's this term called regenerative agriculture, which is trying to take, kind of a pastoral farming approach to farming and bring back biodiversity and things like that, and reducing emissions along with it. Technology plays into that because, you're shipping this, like, theoretically beef or whatever kind of, product that you're doing, you can kind of ship it everywhere. And people can eat higher quality, meat, for instance, that's, more nourishing. So that's an example of kind of the best of technology coming together with something that's, definitely not factory farming, right? So is there something like that? Are there principles in the past in education that maybe we lost along the way that could meld really well with this future technology? Do you have any opinions on that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of them. I think any school right now that is utilizing their outdoor space, like teaching kids how to put your hands in the dirt and the flow of, whether it be studying the moon cycles or whether it be, understanding like the earth that you live on. I think those are really big skills that we are trying to tap into, because our kiddos do spend a lot of time on screens, and it is good to go outside. And I know that COVID forced a lot of us outdoors, and spending more time outside, which I think is wonderful. Jeff, I know that you guys love bike riding, and that was a favorite pastime here in Houston. I think
we missed the Bayou Trail.
Yeah, I think a lot of families, they spend more time outside. We have we call it an outdoor kitchen. We have a little outdoor kitchen, which is like a kid kitchen, a little for the pre-Kers, and they have an outdoor garden where they get to go spend time. And so we have been fortunate to be able to create that space for them, so that at a young age, they're spending time doing things like that. I think that part of the shift will continue. Do we think we'll still have textbooks? Do we think that we'll still need textbooks that grow outdated and then we're forced to recycle? Is there a way to move beyond textbook work? I think something that I have learned in just, becoming a grown up as I continually grow into my own grown upness, is that, you can see a perspective. There's so many different perspectives that you can be hearing. And so for the kiddos, like we talked about, that are reading the middle school books, when you read a textbook, you're obviously hearing usually one opinion. You're hearing one voice. And we talk a lot about revisionist history. Like, are we going back and actually revising history? Or are we just expanding the voices in the conversation? And so that can be a really touchy subject. And I think that's maybe a touchy one right now, even in our current culture. But when you look and you have kind of the polarization that we may have had in recent years, and some of the tribalism that has come out of it, of like, this is my camp over here and that's you over there, and we're not going to cross paths. And I think that when we look at what has historically happened, I hope that they look back on this time and say, let's not just hear one voice, let's hear multiple voices. And when you look back at Civil War, when you look back at anything that happened where we heard one opinion, I think it's good to move away from the textbook thinking of there's one right answer to what happened. Like when you're answering a question on a test and they say, what was the Civil War about? I hope that we don't simplify it down so much to say it was about one thing. I hope that we say, here are all the voices, even recently, that have come out to say, here's what was happening at that time. And so I wonder if textbooks might become a part of the past. Like, that'll be part of our childhood, lugging the big textbooks around.
I think so.
Yeah.
But I think you raise a really good point about how, to me, I think that I realized like junior or senior year of college, that really the key of education is analysis. And I'm sure that studying sociology and theology, you also realize the same thing. But like, it's not just about absorbing information and accepting the interpretation that someone has given you. I think one of my favorite classes that I ever took was, I forget what the exact name, but it was like American political thought. And we had this large textbook of like all these speeches and, Federalist Papers and everything that had been written that was like really prominent. And we would just read them and like talk about them. And there's no wrong answer, right? You just have a conversation around it and like, what does it mean? And I think that it is a little bit sad that we have this political divide where in some places maybe you have a more liberal approach, in some places you have a more conservative approach, instead of being able to like allow people to have that analysis, allow them to do their own analysis. It's a very interesting conversation. Julie, I want to ask you something that's a little bit unrelated, but something that I think is really relevant, and that is just I had brought this up to you in the past. I don't know if you still remember, but just thinking about like urbanization in modern times and the fact that technology has changed the need to necessarily live in cities. And I just really want to get your perspective about it, because when thinking again about COVID-19 and the damage that we're doing to the earth, and I've been to China, and I absolutely adored the Chinese people. I thought they were amazing when I was there. But the reality is that there are a ton of them living in these cities, and I think it's natural that certain diseases are going to pop up when you're living in really dense urban populations. So I wanted to kind of get your sense of how city, urban versus rural life could, things that we should be on the lookout for regarding that.
Yeah, I think anytime you're going to put people, like you said, like, cramming too many people into one space, you're going to have a lot of trouble. I think that, mask wearing, like just in and of itself, helped cut down on the flu. They're like, the flu like disappeared. What happened to the flu? And so I think us taking our health seriously is part of what helps, to get to your question of, is it just because so many people live nearby? Maybe, that's part of it. But also, were we taking our health seriously? Were we pretty lax with how often we washed our hands? I remember thinking 20 seconds to wash my hands, that's nothing. And then washing them and thinking, this is a long time. How long was I washing my hands before?
Yeah.
And I think, using hand sanitizer has obviously been a good thing, but also teaching kids that like washing your hands is better. And, what does it look like to not send your kiddos to school when they have a snotty nose? And so I think like, right, all of that kind of stuff has helped, just our taking our health more seriously. But I also think what you're saying about urbanization, versus spending time or making communities outside of the city, I think it has its pros and its cons, right? Like, there are people, I know James and I have talked about this before. There are kiddos who don't have access to the things that we want them to have access to, that live in rural places. And I know that you guys have done a great job of trying to be connected to them, and trying to get those kids resources so that they can have the same experiences that kids that live in the city have. And I think there's sometimes a lack of information that gets out to those kinds of places. I connected once with a guy on Twitter who lived in Idaho, and he told me, there's 3 months out of the year where I am trapped in my home because there's snow everywhere and I can't go to work. And so I play video games, that's all I do for 3 months. And wow. I was just thinking, yeah, right.
Be fun for like 2 days and then I'd be done. Maybe 3.
He's like, I live near mountains, and I, or, wherever it was, he said there was a lot of snow and I can't leave my house. And so I don't have the same things that you have being in a city. I can't do my job all the time throughout the year. And so, we save money for those 3 months because I can't work, So I think there's pros and cons to all of that. I think what we have to be careful with is, are we thinking about the next generation? Are we just thinking about ourselves? Are we curious about what will happen to the earth? Are we curious about what our kiddos will have to suffer through? Are we curious about those things? And I think oftentimes we say, oh yeah, sure, of course, but we're really not. We're really not, because we're not living lifestyles. It's like the greenwashing and things like that. We're not we are not making conscious choices. We do a few things to alleviate our guilt, but are we making huge transitions? And I think that one of them is the urbanization conversation. So I can't answer it. It's another $1 million question.
Well, it's also a very expensive question. I mean,
it is.
Yeah.
you're talking about trillions and trillions of dollars if we ever want to fix that. I do wish, I mean, as do we all, that Houston would take more seriously having more parks and having better drainage and things like that are so destructive.
Yeah,
But
I think when the earth starts talking back, when we start having things like a pandemic, or we start having things like, the hurricane, tsunami, like when life is lost and it's not, the New York Times did an ad where they showed all the dots of all the people who had lost their lives, and just how unfathomable that is to our brains to think through all of those people. When you think about the amount of money that it took to come back from Hurricane Harvey here in Houston, and when you start looking at things like that, it's like it blows your mind. Too much to think about, like you said before. Like it kind of melts your brain a bit to try to think through it. But I think when the earth starts talking back, if we're not willing to listen, it will just get louder. Like with any problem, the volume will continue to turn up until you start to acknowledge it. I know with my kiddo, when she's upset, if I'm not willing to listen, her volume gets louder and louder and louder until I'm willing to listen. Right? James is shaking his head.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. If I do not get those daggum blueberries to my little boy,
guys, for
he'd
me,
be like,
it's just
"Get those
repetitive.
blueberries!"
Same volume, but over and over and over and over again.
Right.
I don't know. I guess I just raised my kid wrong. But Julie,
Maybe you may have raised him right. Like,
yeah, Julie, I hear your point. 100%. A beautiful insight. So,
fix the problem, it gets louder. Absolutely.
Guys, one more time. We'll wrap up with Julie, but we want to thank her.
Okay.
Obviously, great friend to both me and James, personally and professionally. Yeah. But reminder, if you stuck with us to the end, St. Mark's summer camps, if you're a Houston resident, or if you want to just fly your kid down for the week.
Fly on in, people. The water's warm.
Check them out on our summer camp. Julie's going to be there all summer, and making sure the kids are fed, or
safe.
Making sure that they are safe.
There's a mountain of things that Julie does. I think you were telling me / complaining / bragging one day, Julie. It was great. The list of things you had to do to get a nurse on staff, for instance, like it's not cheap. So, anyway, Julie and the rest of St. Mark's really does their due diligence to make sure all sorts of, balls are juggled, right? So, sanitizing and keeping a nurse on staff and making sure that, you got contact information for parents and that kids are having a good time and that there's a playground space outside where kids can play as well. So, I mean, there's so many things that y'all are doing to make it a really fun camp experience during the day where they can have a lot of fun and get a little bit of educational, insight out of it too. So,
yeah, we're grateful to host you guys. We're hosting a couple other groups on the campus as well, and trying to keep all of those groups safe and in your own bubbles so that kids can come and have the space to have experience their camps. But we're thankful for lots of outdoor space. We're thankful for a big campus. We can just spread everybody out. So we're thankful for y'all being one of those groups to be there. We'll also have a day camp where kids can do their traditional summer camp stuff, and a lot of families like to pair those two things together for coding day camp. So we're thankful to just be able to give the best of all the worlds we can.
Yeah,
sounds good, Julie. Thanks again for being here, and we'll catch you soon.
Yeah, always a pleasure. See ya.
Thank you.